In this module, we'll be talking about contracts and the contract process at Brandeis University. First, to dive into contract policy and what really contracts are. When would you use them? So contracts are a binding agreement between two or more parties. So in this case, it would be between the university, which your organization is representing, but the university and the external party. Most contracts at Brandeis are required to be viewed by the Office of Procurement and Business Services. And then once they are approved, they'll facilitate the agreement being signed by our CFO on campus, our Chief Financial Officer, and then shared and signed by the external organization or individual. There are only select individuals, as I mentioned, the CFO at Brandeis, who are authorized to execute or sign contracts. They should never be signed or completed by you or your organization. I want to reiterate that this process can take quite a while because, as you will see, there are various parties involved. It can take up to 6 weeks and in some cases even longer. So please, please, please plan ahead. So why would you need a contract, or in what cases? So they are a great way of recording a commitment to a service or ongoing service over a period of time. And really it helps protect the university and therefore you all as an organization, as well as the individual or vendor from the risks associated with that particular service being provided. This is different than an invoice or another type of payment. It's really this legal agreement as well. Who needs a contract? So we use the term independent consultant to really refer to any external individual or company not affiliated with Brandeis that we are hiring for a specific service. There are some situations where an invoice alone is okay. And if you're unsure at any point of whether or not you need a contract, please reach out to student engagement and we will answer that question for you. So independent consultants, any vendors that are planning to come and sell goods here at Brandeis, performers, which includes DJs, singers, bands, and any freelancers that are here at Brandeis. Who doesn't need a contract? Any Brandeis students, faculty, or staff must get paid through payroll and human resources. So these individuals do not need a contract for payment. Individuals or organizations that are not receiving payment, if you're planning to have someone come and do a service or perform or consult with your organization, but they're doing it for free, they don't need a contract. And then coaches, these must be hired as temporary employees if they are providing a continued service on a recurring basis. So if it's a one-time coach for a dance class or a consultant for a theater production, that's okay, those can have a contract. But if it is a continuing service, they must be hired through HR. And you can work with student engagement to do this. Getting into the important documents necessary for the contract process. The ICA, or Independent Consultant Agreement, is the main contract that Brandeis uses. It's a standard template that you will use for any individual or organization unless they have their own contract or agreement. You don't need to use both. If that individual has their own contract that they want to use, that's fine. We can use that and you do not need the ICA. An important note for the ICA is that it is 3 pages long. You need to have all 3 of those pages included in a file, and all of them must be submitted together in order for the contract to be valid. The second document is an invoice. So while the contract is the binding agreement between the university and the contractor, we also need an invoice in order for accounting to be able to pay that individual after the service is provided. This is a standard invoice template that we've created and shared with all of our clubs. If you have, or the individual or external organization has their own type of invoice, that is perfectly fine as well. This is just a template in case they do not have their own version. Then there is the tax document. This is in order for the contract to be legally binding and for the individual to be able to receive payment, we need a sort of tax document for them. Generally, this is going to be the vendor certification form, also known as the W-9, which you can see on the left of your screen. It's important to note that Brandeis has their own version of the W-9 that must be used. We cannot take the IRS W-9. It must be this one, which again is shared with all clubs in the handbook. If the individual is international, they're not a citizen of the US, they're external, then it is this other form called the W-8-BEN, which is a certificate of foreign status that is used as a tax document instead of the W-9. So one of these must be submitted to the Box account link that is shared with you. I'll get into that more in a minute, but that is the vendor certification form. Finally, these forms are optional, but if the individual wishes to be paid directly to their bank through a wire transfer rather than through a check sent in the mail, they can use one of these two forms. Again, this depends on whether or not they are a US citizen or residing in the US or an international contractor. That depends on whether or not the ACH request form is used or the wire transfer information sheet. Those are all the documents that you need to know about and that are referenced in the contract process. Now to get a little bit into the actual specifics of that process. An important note is that you should have watched this video before continuing the contract process. We are going to be checking that each organization, if they're trying to submit a contract, has individuals who have done contract training and have gone through all these steps. The first thing is really to make sure that when you are requesting money in Marathon, you are providing sufficient funds for whatever contractor you wish to hire. I also want you to consider if the cost from the contractor is really worth it. So think about the number of attendees, the duration of the event, and then whether or not the cost of that contractor is really beneficial for your organization for that amount. Along that same line, we encourage you to reach out to a variety of contractors and come up with varying comparison of costs to make sure that you're really getting the best deal. Reach out to the contractor using our email templates if that's helpful. Those are linked in the handbook. And again, make sure that you're sending them the ICA contract, the invoice template, and the W-9 form along with the Box link where they should be uploading the W-9. An important note is that if an agent is involved, which is the case for some performers or more high-profile individuals, they should contact the program specialist for student engagement and leadership, or just the student engagement office in general. Students should really not be going back and forth and communicating or negotiating with these third parties or agents. Once you've gotten the ICA or contract back from that individual, they've filled it out and they've signed it, the invoice and ICA should be sent directly to this program specialist in student engagement, and the contractor should submit their W-9 or W-8-BEN to that Box account. Here's some information about how that should be formatted and what the name should be, but just please note that contract and invoice sent via email to the program specialist, W-9 submitted by the contractor directly to Box. The program specialist will then send those forms to procurement. They will review them. They can take up to 3 weeks for this to happen, and they will get it signed by the CFO. Again, I can't repeat this enough. You should never sign the contract that is making you legally liable for anything that happens. It should only be signed by the CFO. Procurement will then share that contract back. Once it's signed with the program specialist, they'll send it to you, and then you should share it with the contractor. Here's a visual representation of those steps that I just mentioned, if that is helpful, kind of color-coded based on who is completing each step. After the service is provided or the event has happened, then we get into paying the contractor. So once we've gotten that fully signed contract back, even if it's before your event, you should submit a payment request on Campus Groups, submit it under that original budget request for that contractor. And then the Student Union Treasury and the Associate Director of Student Engagement will review the contract and W-9 and invoice, and they'll put that payment request on hold until approving it after the event has actually happened. The associate director will do what they need to do for the documentation on Coupa, which is our online payment gateway. And then a check will be mailed to the contractor after the event or service has been completed. Similar to if they did a bank transfer, that will also only happen after the event or service has been completed. For the check, especially, this can take up to 4 to 6 weeks. So please make sure you're informing your contractors that this process can take a little while and for them to be patient. Again, here's a visual representation of that payment timeline. The process can take 4 to 6 weeks, even after the event, for payment to be received. That is all about contracts in a nutshell. All of this information is in the Student Org Handbook, as well as the Club Finance Handbook. And when in doubt, please reach out to Student Engagement or to the Student Union Treasury with any questions about the contract process.